Everyone should be beginning to roll in as I start speaking here. So thank you all for joining us today. My name is Brittany Higginbotham, and I'm a communications and digital specialist for the Institute for Public Relations. Today, we're thrilled to present a webinar on the best-selling book, The ROI of LOL, and how laughter breaks down walls, drives compelling storytelling, and creates a healthy workplace. We have our authors featured today, Steve Cody, he's an IPR trustee and also the CEO of Peppercomm. We also have Clayton, Fletcher, Chief Comedy Officer for Peppercomm. We're also thrilled to have another IPR trustee, Linda Rutherford. She's Chief Administration Officer of Southwest Airlines. She's going to be moderating this fireside chat. But before I hand it over, I have a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available for playback within 48 hours. We encourage all the questions, comments, and resources in the chat. We will have an audience Q&A at the end of the session, so please enter any questions in the Q&A box. If you have any tech issues, you can message myself or any IPR staff member to resolve. And with that, I'll hand it over to Linda to get us started.
Hey, Brittany, thank you all. Thank you very much. And thanks and welcome, everyone. We are excited to get to spend a little bit of time with you to talk about the power of humor and certainly how that parlays into the health and culture of a workplace. So I was thrilled and honored to get to write the foreword for the book, The ROI of LOL, and it has been a real treat to work with Steve and Clayton as this passion project has come to life. So first of all, congratulations on getting the book launched. It is, it's insightful. It's a fun read. And I understand that the audiobook is even more spectacular because you guys actually get to, showcase some of your humor and improv. It's clear that you two work well together and that you share this vision of the power of humor and the different roles that it can play, and certainly in business. So wanted to kind of start off with how you two got to know each other, and then what made you decide to, put a book on humor out that would appeal to business audiences.
Sure. Thanks for the intro, Linda, and thank you for writing the foreword. If those of you who haven't bought the book, buy it for no other reason. The foreword is worth the price. Really is. It's so well done. But yeah, so the way Clayton and I met each other was purely serendipitous. I was going through my typical male midlife crisis, and I had various things on the bucket list. One of them was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Another was performing stand-up comedy in Manhattan. So I enrolled in a class 5 nights. The 5th night, you get to do a 5-minute set at a Manhattan comedy club, and they give you a DVD of it afterwards. Well, I got through it. Worst day of my life. The panic and anxiety attacks were off the charts. But I got through it, and I was out mopping off my brow. And this guy comes walking up to me, taps me on the shoulder, and he said, "I'm Clayton Fletcher. I emceed the show. You weren't half bad. I have my own shows at different clubs. Would you like to perform next week?" So I immediately thought, wow, this professional comedian thinks I'm great. This is a whole new career path for me. And it didn't turn out to be a career path for me, but it did become an immediate obsession with me. For the next 2 years in a row, I worked with Clayton. Clayton was my comedy coach in addition to emceeing various shows. And I performed in front of audiences as large as 5, as small as 2. Got very comfortable with silence and objections and hecklers. What I learned was 2 things. A, I was never going to be a funny comedian, but B, a lot of the skills that comedians know, I realized I was transferring to the workplace. And I was suddenly becoming a little bit more comfortable in terms of making presentations, in terms of reading the audience, in terms of being an active listener. I also studied improvisational comedy at the Upright Citizens Brigade. So I had those skills as well. And it just dawned on me, Linda, that this might be something that would work well and take hold at my firm, Peppercomm. So I asked Clayton to come over and train the management committee, and they were deer in the headlights when I told them that would be happening. And at the end of the session, they liked it so much and saw so much energy and camaraderie come out of it that we decided to roll it out throughout the agency, which we've done now for 15 years. We've tied it into our charitable fundraising at the end of the year. And everybody gets to perform on a Manhattan comedy stage, which is pretty cool. And then, as we were doing this, we started letting clients and, prospective clients know about it. And, we had quite a few good opportunities, but the big game changer was the pandemic and all of the fallout in terms of the workplace, in terms of employers finally realizing that employees were their number one asset, employees being very open and vocal about anxiety, depression, isolation, lack of collaboration, you name it. So all of a sudden, humor, especially as the world at large became darker and darker every single day, more and more employees were turning to their employer as to be a safe place, to let them be, as you know, their full selves. So Clayton and I, along with some other people within Peppercomm, really broadened our offering beyond stand-up, beyond improv, beyond sketch comedy, to do a lot of internal and external work, addressing everything from generational gaps to silos between sales and marketing, 4 different groups within a mega corporate communications department sending out 4 different messages to stakeholder audiences. So a lot of breaking down of silos, getting people back together again, and helping them feel that the employer cares about them, and that B, laughter and humor can and will be embraced as one of the attributes of the culture itself. So Clayton, you can certainly add to that. You can provide color commentary as a professional comedian.
Okay, well, thank you, Steve. The only thing I want to add, I think you told the story perfectly, but from my perspective, I was hired by the comedy club. They said, we have a group of amateurs. They're making their debuts. They just took a class. None of them really know what they're doing. And there was one guy on that stage that I thought I wanted to encourage because I thought he was pretty funny. It was Steve. I had no idea that he was a CEO. When he invited me to come and do some coaching with him at Peppercomm, that was literally the first office building that I had ever been inside in my whole life. So that was 15 years ago. And now, of course, we've been inside so many different companies and different organizations over the years. But yeah, what started out as Steve said, just a serendipitous meeting. He had impressed me on stage. Steve is always very humble and self-deprecating, but he actually was pretty funny. And I tell him to this day, if he would have quit his day job as a CEO, he probably could have made it as a comic.
I'd be driving a cab in Manhattan if I had done that. But in the last year and a half, 2 years, as I said, Linda, it became, much more front of mind. It's now a required course at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. It's a required course at DePaul University, Emerson College. It's going to be more and more important, especially in business classes, because business executives, have come up through the ranks really without storytelling skills, without understanding the skills, traits, abilities of a stand-up or improvisational comedian, and how important that can be in terms of leadership, in terms of getting through tough times, in terms of sharing negative or bad news. So it's we were approached by 2 or 3 different publishers, and we actually had a bidding war, which is pretty amazing. But HarperCollins just made us an offer we couldn't refuse, and they've been absolutely terrific in terms of supporting us, setting up all sorts of different speaking opportunities, podcasts, Barnes and Noble signings at bookstores. So HarperCollins has been a great partner for us, Linda. So that's kind of the story up until today.
Well, I love how the partnership has blossomed over the last 15 years. Steve, you mentioned something, Clayton said when he met you, he had no idea you were a CEO. You talked about how, as this thought of humor in the workplace has been now blended into some college curriculum around development of leadership. Online today, we've got a real diverse slate of leaders. And, one of the points that the book makes is that humor has the power to sort of humanize leaders. And we often talk about, you said self-deprecating, as a description of Steve. Sometimes leaders get, labeled as robots or inauthentic. How can we help break down that perception? And humor, tends to require vulnerability. I mean, you talked about your sweaty palms as you were getting up on stage to do the amateur comedy night. Leaders sometimes have a hard time showing vulnerability and deprecating, approachability. Why is that, do you think?
Well, it takes, not to pat myself on the back, but all the people that we've trained over the years, it takes courage. It takes some degree of courage to be vulnerable and to show your humanity and to share stories in which you perhaps were the underdog or had made a big mistake and be willing to laugh at yourself. And we're not suggesting that's for all leaders. Obviously, there are some leaders that are just top-down autocratic, managed by fear. This is obviously not for them. But for those leaders, and I use the word with a lowercase l, at any level of the organization, you can be a leader. If you think that you have the opportunity to broaden your skill set in terms of active listening, in terms of better engagement with the audience, in terms of using some of the skills and traits and some of the, I hate to use the word games, but they are games, of stand-up and improvisational humor, you can bring a whole new perspective to your workplace. You can bring a whole new way of ideating to your workplace. And most importantly, you can break down those silos. We have more generations in the workplace than ever before. We have the most divided country probably since 1860, definitely since 1860. So that divisiveness is coming into the workplace as well, Linda, as you know. So this can be a surefire remedy to help alleviate some of that pain. Clayton?
Yeah, so my color commentary on that one is when it comes to developing your leadership skills, I believe that there are things comedians know that leaders should really learn. You might think that when a stand-up comedian goes up on stage, he or she would want to have the perspective of being, I know everything, I'm the authority, you should all listen to me, right? And people really tune out when you come at them with that tonality, when you have that type of voice where you are not really listening, but you're just, you think that what you have to say is so important. So when that happens, audiences tune out, whether that's an audience in a comedy club or in a boardroom. So what we've learned, what comedians already know, is that as soon as you get up on stage and say, look, I have a problem, people start to pay attention. When you show your vulnerability, when you are free to admit when everything isn't perfect, that's when you really can get people's attention and have them see you as a human being, as opposed to like, Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. That's not the type of leadership that we're looking for in modern times.
And the other opportunity, if you will, that we've been able to help many organizations with is undergoing change, which every organization is doing every single day. But I'm talking about a major, change management program, which senior management says, okay, this is who we're going to be now. Go and do it. So the middle management and lower level employees feel they have not been heard. They have not been part of this exercise. So we do a lot of improvisational training work with them to get them to think about, okay, how can this program can be implemented? How can my voice be heard? How can I be a champion and an advocate so that and then we bring that back to senior management so that they feel their voices have been heard. And the programs are much more successful than the previous ones that have come into place because they've been just top down, do this. So a lot of this is active listening and getting the senior leadership to allow the middle and lower levels to be a little bit more open-minded in terms of their thinking and their participation. And I think that's the time of workplace. Gen Z, millennials, Gen Alpha, they're going to want to work at organizations like that.
I had a mentor once that said, people don't care what you know until they know you care. And so, just impressed upon me through, trial and error and experience that find ways to connect with people. And that's what I watch comedians do on stage. Some are funnier than others, but even those who tell a humor story really get people to kind of dial in when they feel like they've made a connection with the audience. And that's part of what we have to do as leaders, is find a way to connect with our people. You mentioned the polarizing world that we live in. So when we think about humor, sometimes that's scary to people because we don't want to offend anyone, right? With all of the divisive issues and the social topics that organizations are grappling with, how in the world, with a world so on edge as it is, can you think about how to navigate, using humor and levity while still being respectful? What does that look like?
Sure, I hate using legal terms, but we conduct a lot of due diligence before we engage with any organization. So we make sure we understand what the guidelines are and what the guardrails are, what is and is not acceptable in terms of the written and spoken word. So we have a very good feel. We also do a lot of intelligence, obviously, about what are the issues, what are the problems that this particular organization is facing, and how can we help turn that around. So I would also say, Clayton we do quite a bit of upfront work when we have like a half day or a full day. We'll take 45 minutes to explain how it works, why it works, et cetera. And then Clayton will talk about what should and should not be said. And I'll turn it over to the color commentator. Clayton, you can elaborate a little bit on how we make sure, and we've yet, knock on wood, to run into any issue with any employee of any client organization participating in our humor training.
All right. So for color commentary, Steve sees himself as the Al Michaels of PR. So I guess that makes me John Madden. But yeah, just to kind of, dovetail on that, some people have the idea that comedy is about speaking the unspeakable, right? They assume that it has to do with what goes on in the bedroom or the bathroom, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And to be fair, a lot of comedy is that, but a lot of comedy is not that. And so a big part of our work is when we first engage with a new organization, we try to set those guardrails very clearly. There's a big difference between doing a comedy workshop in the corporate space in the boardroom at 4 o'clock in the afternoon than rather than performing at the Comedy Cellar on Saturday night at 12:30 a.m. right? So we talk about what those differences are, and the reason why we've never had an issue like an HR problem or any legal battles over this is because we really set those guidelines very clearly. And I like to borrow a phrase from the New York City Department of Sanitation when they first told us that we were going to start the recycling program in New York. This must be 20 years ago, but I'll never forget those posters because it was complicated. It was like the green bin is for this and the blue bin is for that and the yellow bin is for this. It was a very complicated system, but they said at the bottom in bold letters, when in doubt, leave it out. And so I kept that and I apply that to our work that we do at Peppercomm and with other companies, because that's really the bottom line. If you have any question in your mind, if you think it might be really funny, but you're not quite sure whether it's appropriate, it's not appropriate. So leave it out.
So many of us online obviously have, been in our work experience or through our, college experiences, studied, communication strategy, the construction of a good, communications plan. Some of us might have journalism background. So, we learned the who, what, when, where, why, how, to construct the inverted pyramid of a good news release or news story. But now you're bringing in something different into the storytelling, which is sort of the tenets of sketch comedy or improv. What are those exactly, and how can we as communicators think about how to sort of blend them into our style of storytelling for the organizations that we represent?
Sure. Well, actually, I'll start with stand-up, Linda, because stand-up, you learn how to set up a punchline. And we represent very serious businesses who are telling very serious stories. So we've been able to use the tenets and techniques of stand-up, setting up a punchline, to come up with an unexpected subject line and an unexpected first sentence that will stop a Wall Street Journal reporter in her tracks. And get her to read down to the second graph. So that's one example. In terms of the improv, we not only use it in terms of our ideating, but we bring it into the client organization as well and get them to participate. We did this with a major tire manufacturer where they wanted to introduce a new winter tire, and it was a new winter tire, and that's it. So do it, Peppercomm. What are we supposed to? So we had the product people in there, the president of the company, and we played the yes and game, which you participated in, Linda, at our DC board meeting. And at the end of the SN meeting, we figured out that these tires become especially important in terms of safety whenever the temperature drops below 44 degrees. So we said, that's it. We'll go to look at every single state. We'll start with the ones that go under 44 degrees probably in August, like Alaska, and we'll do it throughout the year. And so we did tremendous regional publicity for this campaign, tremendous national publicity for the campaign. There was no advertising, so the sales increase was attributable directly to public relations. And I'll let my color commentator talk about the use of sketch comedy in business.
Yeah, so in terms of, the difference between communicating in a comedic way and doing the traditional inverted pyramid, as you say, Linda, in sketch comedy, we start with a setting and a thesis. Like, so what are we really trying to say, and where are we? Who's here, right? So if you think about great sketches, and by the way, if anyone's unsure, a sketch is something similar to what you might see on Key and Peele, Saturday Night Live, Inside Amy Schumer, these kind of TV shows where it's really just a short story. And the first thing you want to do is establish where we are, who's here, and what's the problem. And so we've done the same kind of thing in terms of, I don't want to say use the word commercials, but sometimes Peppercomm or other organizations that we help are asked to, maybe you're going to do like a big annual meeting and somebody wants you to present a 2-minute video showcasing your latest offering, or something along those lines, or maybe just meet the executive team. And these videos tend to be really bland and boring. What we'll do is we'll kind of turn the idea on its head, and in sketch we call that an inversion. So you take something that would normally be positive. One example I think of right away that's one of my favorites of all time is, Peppercomm was asked to do one of these. I think it was for just a big, PR council event, a huge thing with, lots and lots of different agencies there. Each one had to show a 3-minute video showcasing what sets their agency apart. And each one was very similar to the next. My name is Tom. I work on the 17th floor. This is my office. So boring, like you could actually fall asleep watching them. Well, what we did is we did a political attack ad against Peppercomm. So we were showcasing our strengths, but also kind of putting ourselves down as though we were the competition. So, if you've seen those attack ads where they show the enemy candidate and then the screen turns black and white with maybe like some red dripping down, like, but what's the real truth behind what's going on at Peppercomm? And we had so much fun with that. And we were able to kind of tell our story in, as Steve said earlier, an unexpected way. And then Peppercomm ended up being the punchline. And everyone commented later that our video really stood out. And it was because we used the skills that we learned from different, types of comedy, different fundamentals that you learn in comedy areas that we applied to that project and similar projects over the years.
Yeah, and we'll often, not to belabor the point, Linda, but we'll often end a session or seminar. We'll start with stand-up, we'll move into improv, and then we'll end with sketch. And with one particular company, again, they had 4 different groups responsible for special events, social, internal, external. And after we had helped them, fine tune what messages should be to the community, to the internal stakeholders, to when they're holding a special event, we had each group go up and perform a sketch. And half the group would be the target audience. And a lot of this is putting yourself in the audience's shoes and thinking what will resonate with them, what will connect with them, how might we approach this from an unexpected way. And each of these 4 groups just did a phenomenal job that was not only spot on and gave them new ideas in terms of how to communicate with and connect with those target stakeholders, but they absolutely nailed it. They had a blast. I mean, it was that good. Each of the 4 were downright funny, and these were bankers. I mean, these are not funny people by trade, but they really
Well, there is definitely something there to kind of coming at it, first of all, from the audience's perspective, and using the idea of what will that audience find humorous or, or funny, to be able to connect with them. That's an interesting way to think about how to, even solve a pretty knotty communications problem.
Mhm.
I want to open the aperture just a little bit before we see what questions our online folks have. But, the book also, covers a good deal about establishing healthy work cultures. So sort of beyond, communicate applications to communication, how do you all see that humor and organizational culture are linked?
I think, and again, I'll ask my color commentator sidekick to weigh in here, but I think, over the years, I have obviously led a lot of our comedy training sessions. And whenever I hold a staff meeting, I have one tomorrow. I'm very open about my mistakes, things that I did wrong. And, I won't admit that, I'm perfect, but I am very open to admitting mistakes. And when I'm on stage, they see me bomb every single Christmas, show that we do for fundraising purposes. And that makes me more approachable to my employees. And that lets them know it's okay to admit fault, make mistakes. We're all about making mistakes, owning mistakes, learning from mistakes, failing fast, if you will. But it really puts a jolt into the organization in terms of, this is a cool place. I can be myself here within the guidelines and guardrails. I can approach Steve. I can approach any senior manager. I can have a direct conversation. I can be funny. If you could see our internal Teams channels and the conversations, obviously a lot of them are very serious, but at the same time, they will start having a great time just talking about the news of the day or whatever. And the yes and exercise. Yes and is part of our vocabulary, and it keeps our minds constantly open. So when somebody says we should do X or Y for a client, we'll say yes and. That's a great idea. We could also do this. We could do that. So yes and is almost our tagline at this point. It's become that embedded in our culture. And really since 2000, we've had less than 10% turnover. And when people leave, they go to probably different industries, or they want to become teachers. Or, if they're failing, we ask them, we give them time. But those are the only turnover issues we've had. And I attribute that, and we've had any number of, great workplace awards that we've won. So I attribute all of that to humor being embedded in our DNA. Clayton?
Yeah, so a big part of my job as chief comedy officer, which who has a cooler title than that, right? But a big part of my job at Peppercomm is to help with our HR staff to kind of help create that culture with what we've identified as the 5 characteristics of a healthy workplace. And who doesn't love a good acronym? Ours is TOAST: trust, openness, authenticity, storytelling, and teamwork. And so when something is breaking down, or that culturally something is not going the way we want it to, we try to figure out which one of these 5 characteristics it needs to be addressed, right? So a lot of companies will tell us, when we say, well, what's the culture here like? They always tell us the same thing. Well, we're like a family. We have a lot of fun here, But then we start really digging a little deeper into these areas, and you can see that where the culture is breaking down is, they say they are open, right? O for open. And the openness just actually isn't there, because they claim to be open, but the door to the CEO's office is always closed and locked. And if you have an idea, you have to go through the proper channels, which ends up never actually getting to the people who need to hear the idea. So we learn how to make sure that we actually have a flow of information and of opinions, and we get that feedback. So one thing that we talk about a lot in the book is this McKinsey Institute study, where they said 70% of all corporate change initiatives fail. And we think that we've kind of put our finger on the reason why that is. And many times it's because the people whom the change will affect aren't included in the change. So the way we do things is a little bit different. We tend to brainstorm as a group, and that brainstorm will involve people from the C-suite all the way down the organization. And so when you do that, then everybody feels like they're included. And, to use the most over word used in culture, in terms of business culture, you really do create a family that way, because, family is sitting around the kitchen table talking about our problems together and enjoying a good meal. And so that's what I think it's really about. And, we learn this from the writer's room. You might watch an amazing TV show at night, like Tonight Show or The Late Show, whatever you might enjoy. Well, it's not just Stephen Colbert up there being funny. There's a whole team of people behind that person making him look great. And the way they work is they implement the comedy skills of teamwork to, build those comedy bits and those sketches out as a group. And so that's what it's really all about is, teamwork does in fact make the dream work. And so that's what we focus on the most.
at Southwest Airlines, we're approaching 80,000 employees, and we're about 83% unionized. So you can imagine that makes for a rather eclectic family. We have our, we don't always get along. Sometimes we have our disagreements and things you have to heal from. But our version of toast is what we call a servant's heart, a warrior spirit, and a fun-loving attitude. And so it is those things we look for in prospective employees, and then we work to kind of activate on that. So servant's heart, in other words, are you the kind of person who gets up looking to see how you can serve others, each day, and what does that look like? Take care of your external customers as well as your internal customers. A warrior spirit, are you resourceful? Are you looking for multiple ways to solve a challenge or a problem? And then our fun-loving attitude, which is we want you to bring your authentic self to work. We don't want you to have to drop your personality at the door. We always say that we're going to take our work seriously, but not take ourselves too seriously. I saw Clark Dumont put that in the chat there, but we very much ascribe to that. And so, things aren't always easy. I like to say at Southwest, we operate in weather and serve the general public. So what could possibly go wrong? But, we ask that our employees kind of approach every day with those three things. And that they'll always be forgiven if they make a mistake. They'll always be encouraged to lean toward the customer, and we invite creative problem solving. So thank you so much.
Well, I think, Linda, that is why you attract and retain so many great employees, because you have those guidelines. Those are the individuals you're looking for. We have those very same guidelines when it comes to recruiting talent to Peppercomm. So I think it's really helped us screen out the individuals who will not succeed in a toast environment, if you will. And it's the same thing when we're talking to prospective clients. We let them know that we want to work with a client whose company we enjoy. We obviously know we have to get the work done. It has to be measurable. But we want to enjoy each other's time together. So some prospective clients have ended meetings literally like 15 minutes in after I say that. And they say, look, Steve, we don't laugh in our organization. We don't even smile. If we were to inject comedy into any of our storytelling or our human resources, I'd be fired. End of meeting. So it really serves as a great time saver in terms of employee retention and new business prospecting.
And I see Justine put in the chat too, kind of their organization's version of toast, which is heart, honor, engaged, accountable, respect, and teamwork. So that's probably a great segue, Brittany, to kind of see what questions have popped up that these two gentlemen might be able to answer.
Sure. We have a question from Tim Penning. He says, First, he says, thank you. He has bought the book and he addresses humor in his grad class in comm management. So his question is, have you looked into the humor between employees and not just from leader to employee as a measure of culture?
Yeah, we look at it at all levels at Peppercomm. So absolutely. Are they enjoying themselves? Are they injecting humor into either their internal storytelling within Peppercomm or within our parent company? And or how have they employed humor to either come up with a great new idea for a client and or inject humor into some storytelling for our clients so that they can better connect with their constituent audiences. So that starts right at the associate level and goes right up to the senior levels. So yeah, it's all part of the way in which we evaluate our employees at the end of every 6 months or every year or however often we'll check in with them. So it's a big part of how we evaluate the success of an individual.
If you walk into Peppercomm, you're going to see people smiling, people laughing, people working hard, but also people enjoying each other's company. And that's something that we've taken great measures, great care to foster and to develop. I want to give an example from the book. Peppercomm was acquired a while back by Reuter Finn. So we're now a part of Reuter Finn. And as part of that transition, we attended something called a Reuter Finn Summit. And they were kind of introducing Peppercomm and welcoming us on board. Well, part of this was their team had put together a video where they showcased, what's new at Reuter Finn. And here's, now we're going to talk about Peppercomm. And for whatever reason, one of our account supervisors, Antonio, young guy, and Antonio, ends up being kind of the star of this video. They give him a lot of camera time. They interviewed him, and I guess they really liked his answers because they used Antonio. So the next day when we got back to the office, all of us were joking around with Antonio about he's got a career in Hollywood because the camera loves him, and he's going to be on the red carpet at the Oscars, and on and on and on. And this isn't just something that Steve was doing or that our executive vice president was doing or something like that, but the other people that were at or below his level on the corporate food chain, if you will, we always bring this up because he eats it up. We call him Antonio DiCaprio, right? And in our teams meetings, in the chat, if Antonio says I'm going to be out of the office tomorrow, somebody will make a joke. Oh, well, he's probably got an audition for the new Spielberg movie or whatever. And it's something that we all laugh about together, and we explore how this happens in the book. It doesn't just happen. Like, you have to open that door, and it really comes from the top with Steve opening that door and showing everyone, like, around here, it's okay to laugh. It's okay to put a smile on your face. It's okay to make each other laugh at work, as long as we get our job done. And when he leads by that example, it does filter down to it's not just Steve dictating, okay, we are now going to do comedy. Even when Steve's not in the office, we have that culture, and we end up having that kind of atmosphere. And it's just more fun to be at work. So, it's a better place to be.
It also gives the introverted employees a chance to hone their skills and feel more comfortable in front of their peers. And when we do the training, we often find that the introverts are much funnier than the extroverts. It happens almost all the time, and we are able to identify diamonds in the rough. And when we put them through the comedy training, we say, wow, John or Jane just absolutely killed what they did. Let's bring them into the new business presentation on Monday, because I think their energy will really help us win the business. So we've identified so many future stars through this process.
Well, thank you both. That's super interesting. And I think I want to do that with Tina. Anyway, our next question. Culture, Steve, seems to be a great way to approach it, but isn't culture a feel-good when times are going well and ends when layoffs and cuts are done? How do you maintain culture when the economic conditions are difficult?
I think it's all about authenticity, which is one of those letters in toast. So I try to maintain a level balance at Peppercomm. No matter how good things are going, I try to be the same person I am in bad times. So I think it's all about, being consistent in the way you communicate, in the way you project your nonverbals. And we also cite several examples of really badly handled downsizings, and also those that were handled in an empathetic, human, and authentic way. And I think those are the organizations that they will, it's just my guess, there'll be less survivor's guilt. And I also think that organization will be better positioned to rebound, as opposed to there was a Wall Street company that asked hundreds of people to come in for a 7 a.m. meeting. They thought it was a regular 7 a.m. meeting. No, they were being told they were being terminated, and they had 45 minutes to clean out their boxes, their desks, and they were shuttled off to the front to the elevators. So there are good ways and there are bad ways to handle downsizings. And humor, you don't use humor, but you certainly use empathy and authenticity when you're handling these situations, and they will reverberate to your benefit.
Yeah, we also talk a lot in the book about when things are tough, what's important. It's not really about making jokes all the time. We don't want you guys to get the idea that it's like, people walking around with rubber chickens and bicycle horns, and it's just, a clown college or something. It's not really about that. It's just about the things that modern comedy is really about, being vulnerable and being truthful and being charismatic. It's not so much about, making jokes per se. It's really more about storytelling. And, what this question reminds me of is when the pandemic first hit and we were told that we just needed 2 weeks of sheltering in place to flatten the curve, which turned into a year and a half in New York and most other places. And many companies, especially in our field, were telling their employees, we're not going to fire anybody. We're going to take care of everybody, and they just they said, we'll get through this. And it wasn't authentic, and with that lack of authenticity, you lose trust. You really have to be honest. When things are bad, I think you should tell your employees, we're going through a rough patch right now. We're going to try to weather the storm. And Steve told everyone at Peppercomm, I don't know what's going to happen. Steve is a magician, but he doesn't have a crystal ball to know exactly how long the pandemic would last, or when it would end, or how it would affect business. Right? No one really knew, and so where many companies were trying to just be, all knowing, omniscient, and trying to tell everybody, don't worry, you'll be taken care of. Steve never said that. He said, we're all going to feel the pain from this. I'm taking a pay cut. We hope to not have a lot of layoffs. We hope to get business back to normal as soon as possible. But I think that the way that he approached delivering the news, everyone was on edge. And I think that just knowing that Steve was going to tell the truth no matter what helped the employee base feel that they were in good hands and that they could trust him. So with authenticity comes trust. And if you lose one, you lose the other.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have a question from David on what are the barriers or challenges you faced when presenting humor / comedy training, and how have you overcome them?
Well, the humors I mean, the obstacles or the barriers are the obvious ones. We're in a very serious business, so we don't think this will take. Well, it's not about the type of business you're in. It's really about the way in which your employees interact, either internally or externally. We're going to be working with a big sales force shortly to help them use laughter to close sales more. But the barriers and the obstacles are really those that are worried about what Linda asked about earlier, which is this cancel culture in which we live. And how do we know something would happen that could put us into a major lawsuit situation? So again, all we can do and all we can say is we will conduct our due diligence. We will give you references. This has never occurred. I'm not saying that it won't occur. So there is a certain degree of risk. But if the culture is open, it really shouldn't happen. If they're listening to how we're guiding them through the process, there shouldn't be any problems. But again, if it all emanates, as Linda was saying earlier, it really emanates from the top. Southwest from day one with Herb Kelleher, he didn't take himself too seriously. He took taking care of the passengers very seriously. So it's the senior executive in any organization. If she or he is willing to be open and human and transparent the way Herb Kelleher was at Southwest Airlines, we can help that direct report deal with the obstacles, overcome the barriers, and really produce results. And we have results that we can share from quite a few different clients and across many industries.
Another obstacle that we face quite a bit is people being nervous about trying something like this in their workplace. I don't want to get up on stage and make a fool of myself in front of my coworkers, or maybe say something that I think is going to really make everybody laugh and then it doesn't. That embarrassment. So this is where the trust and the vulnerability and the personal charisma come in. The first thing we always tell everyone is this isn't about figuring out which one of you is the funniest, right? So say Steve and I are in front of a group of, say, 20 employees of company ABC, whatever. We let them know we're going to learn things that comedians know that you should learn. And the reason why is not to find out who's going to be America's next top comedian. There's no casting director from Netflix looking for somebody to give a special to. That's not what it's all about. It's about learning something about yourself, about your own unique point of view, your voice, your sense of humor, finding out what that is and what your strengths and weaknesses are. And so hopefully that will help relieve some of that stress and some of that pressure that people feel. But believe me, getting up on a stage and doing even 1 minute of stand-up comedy is nerve-wracking. I mean, I personally have done it literally thousands of times. And every time I go up on stage, the blood is pumping. I feel the nerves. what we learn is how to use that nervous energy and convert it into a positive, driving, kinetic energy. I mean, I'm even feeling nervous energy right now because I care about the outcome of this webinar. You know, I want you guys to love our book. I want you to love me. I want you to love Steve. And so every time in your life that you ever really felt nervous, it's because the outcome mattered. And so comedians know this. And instead of trying to pretend that we're not nervous, so you don't get up there like a robot, you share your truth and you let that all come out. So we try to teach others to do the same thing that a comedian would do in the same situation. So whether you're learning to give a presentation or you're doing some sort of internal communication where you have to get up and speak, this is what it's all about. It's about learning the skills of communication from the comedy world that can be applied to your industry. So it's not necessarily about how to be your funniest self, but really just being your most authentic and, you know, genuine, real self at work.
And what we see too is the audience, the employees, the fellow employees really do support and embrace the person who is performing, if you will, a 2 or 3 minute set. So the dynamics within the group change so dramatically from the start to the finish of our training session. At the end, they are just on fire. They're loving what they just did. They want to introduce us to other departments. And most of all, they've learned things about their coworkers that they never knew before, things they had in common, because people get up and talk about stories about their commute, about their sports team, about their significant other, about, you know, someone else in the workplace, but they bond in a way. And I've been through countless leadership training exercises. I've never seen the buzz and the energy that I see at the end of one of our sessions.
Okay. Thank you so much. We have another great question on sort of the dynamic when so many workers are working from home and how you create culture with remote workers.
You want to tackle that one first, Clayton?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one thing that we recommend, and this is, I guess, semi-controversial, is we like cameras on. You know, just like this Zoom webinar that we're doing right now is cameras on. You know, one thing that's nice is I can see Linda, I can see Steve, I can see you, Brittany, and the others who have their cameras on. I feel like that's one way to just kind of be more engaged. It's very tempting with the camera off to sort of tune out and maybe look at another tab on your browser or whatever, but it just feels a little bit more like an in-person conversation. Now, to be authentic, as I keep preaching the value of authenticity, a corporate comedy training session, if I have my druthers, I would much rather do it live, just because you do feel a different energy in the room when we're all laughing together. And there's a chemical thing that happens in the brains of the audience members, if you will. The reason why comedy is so much fun and going to a comedy show live is so much fun is because of some of these chemical reactions. I'm talking about, you know, peptides like oxytocin and endorphins and all these feel-good chemicals that are triggered by laughter in the brain. And it's even more so when the person next to you is also laughing. There's something that kind of happens interpersonally in person that can't actually happen, you know, across the space and time of the internet. But that said, we've had a lot of success doing, you know, training sessions on Zoom or Teams or whatever your remote work device of choice happens to be. And the way to keep that going is really just to try to keep people as engaged as possible. And we think the first step is turn on the camera and let us see your pretty face.
And in other instances, we have what we call a Laughing Matters Council. So Clayton is one of 3 comedians, and we have 2 academics on this Laughing Matters Council. So when we have an in-person and virtual group, we will have one of the comedians or academics be part of the virtual group, so that when we do have breaks, when people are putting their material together, they have someone to partner with in the virtual world. So we can overcome those distance obstacles as well. We're doing one tomorrow morning with 150 different people all over the northern and southern hemisphere, and we'll have 1 or 2 of our colleagues, you know, helping us on the virtual side of things, so that those in person, those virtually, will be having the same seamless experience.
Okay, and then we have a question, a really interesting question that was in the chat about navigating humor through text-based communications, and you can't necessarily be sure how people will read the tone.
Yeah, written communication, is that what you're asking about? Yeah, I mean, tonality is obviously, it's very, very critical to figure out what the tonality is. And it's always, what we do in the training is, again, try to put yourself at all times in the audience's shoes so that the stimulus sent and the response received are aligned, and someone doesn't think that whatever is put into writing is negative or offensive. So we do spend quite a bit of time on tonality, both in the written and the spoken word. And some clients actually ask us to focus specifically on that. Clayton?
Yeah, I'll agree with what Steve said. I would also add that in texting, the first rule in text-based comedy is no sarcasm. The key to sarcasm is the tone, right? If I say something like, "Oh, Steve, you really killed it last night," and I'm giving him a genuine compliment, it sounds like a compliment when I say it. But if we both agree that last night didn't go so well, I could say to Steve, "Wow, Steve, you really killed it last night," right? And that's a different sound in my voice, which you cannot recreate over text. So rule number one is avoid sarcasm and irony over text, because it just is very unlikely to translate with the correct tone that is desired. And you might just either confuse or offend the person that you're trying to make smile. Another thing I like, it's kind of juvenile, but if you want to make sure that someone knows you're kidding, put that little smiley face or whatever kind of emoji you want to put there so they know that there's humor intended if there's any doubt. Because it's very, very important that the audience is in on the joke. So if you're kidding with me, but I'm taking it like you're being serious, a lot of bad things can happen. So we have to be more cautious about that when we're not actually speaking to each other, but it's just written words. So those are my tips in that area.
Okay, great. Have either of you found any generational variance in the willingness to accept humor as a valued part of leadership in business?
It's a great question. I wouldn't say generational per se, but there certainly have been individuals at different ages who either don't want to participate, don't want to cooperate, or don't think this is appropriate. So I don't think it's been generational specific. We do talk about in the book, that the different generations do have a different sense of humor, and that we have to be sensitive to that. So again, in conducting our due diligence with an organization beforehand, we want to know about the generational. We want to know about any and all divides. We want to know about any and all barriers, obstacles, if they are age, if they are. We're working right now with a big company for the past year or so, and every conceivable divide exists there. High school dropouts working alongside PhDs, people from red states working alongside blue states, European senior management, American middle management. So part of our employee engagement has been working with them on tonality, on messaging, and on really empowering the lower level and middle level individuals to have a voice, because they always felt they were being talked at as opposed to listened to.
The first question a experienced stand-up comedian will ask when arriving at the comedy club is, how's the crowd? So you grab the MC, how's the crowd? What the question really means is, what's the sensibility of this audience? Now, answers to the question, how's the crowd, can range from, uptight to up for anything, right? So they might say, well, they're kind of older, it's an older crowd tonight, or they really don't like the political stuff. Don't get political with this audience. And part of that is the homework behind the scenes that comedians help each other to get a better idea of what this particular group will find funny, right? If you go see a show on Broadway, it's basically the same show every night. In stand-up comedy, it's not, because we tailor each performance to the specific sensibilities of the audience. So translating that into business, if I'm speaking to a group of senior leaders and they're all, from the baby boomer generation, the type of comedy that they're going to enjoy or do is going to be different from if I have a group of, let's say, Gen Z, and we do talk in the book a lot about what the differences tend to be among those groups. But even within that, there will be pockets where, for example, like Gen Z they tend to enjoy more politically correct humor, right? They don't like punching down, they like punching up, as we talk about. But that doesn't mean there's no one in Gen Z that's going to prefer what we call dark humor, right? So you really do have to figure out who the individuals are. But starting with that generalization can be very useful in figuring out what is likely to land or not land with a particular group.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. So you mentioned both about certain maybe off limits topics, maybe political. Somebody's asking about, they're assuming maybe insult comedy is off limits in a business setting. Maybe could you comment on some of the ones you might really want to avoid? Maybe
Yeah.
also.
Yes, that's a great question, and we address that in the book. It's never smart to use put down humor unless the person you're putting down is in on the joke ahead of time, and he or she is comfortable with the fact that you're making fun of, maybe they're always late to a meeting, or maybe they fell asleep in the last Zoom meeting, or whatever it is. Never ever insult anyone unless it's part of an inside joke that that person is part of and is cool with it being shared. Clayton?
Yeah, so in the book, we explore something Steve has already referenced once or twice during this call, which is our annual holiday fundraiser. So each year we choose a particular charity that we want to raise money to help as part of our end of the year celebration. And that takes place in a comedy club. And instead of the normal comedy lineup, your MC for the evening is none other than my co-author, Steve Cody. It's a black tie affair. We raise money, we do auctions, it's a whole thing. And so it's the performers that Steve is going to be introducing won't be the typical comedy club lineup. They're actually employees of Peppercomm and of Reuter Finn in recent years that I have had the pleasure of working with and helping them to actually craft a real stand-up comedy set to perform for all our friends and family and the general public at a mainstream comedy club in New York City. It's a big night. We're raising money. We know people are going way outside their normal comfort zone for this. And so we make it a big deal. And it's a lot of warm and fuzzy feeling in the room. And Steve brings that to his hosting, where he talks about the charity and how much this means to us and how important it is we do this every year. And then he'll introduce each comedian in a warm and loving way. Like, for example, our next comedian is senior vice president at Peppercomm, one of my favorite people. We've been working together for 20 years. She's also hilarious. Please welcome to the stage, yada, yada, yada. And then that person gets up, and with all that warm and fuzzy energy, that person will absolutely eviscerate Steve Cody. Something like, thank you, Steve, your jacket doesn't fit and your material sucks. Something like that. Now, the reason why this works, it becomes a running gag throughout the night. We do it every year. It always works. When I say works, I mean people laugh hysterically at it. The reason that happens is because, and this is key, Steve is in on the joke. The audience figures out that Steve knows that he's going to be, he's going to be roasted, if you will, right at the beginning of each comedian's set. And so because he's in on the joke, that's what makes it work. If you are unsure whether the person you're about to do put down humor against is going to take it well, our recommendation is never ever do that. That person needs to be informed ahead of time. Is it okay if, as part of this meeting, we make a few jokes about how this happened or that happened, or you wear this color, or whatever the case may be? So that's really the key. Put down humor. Everyone has to buy in from the beginning, or else you really do take a big chance that we don't recommend.
And Clayton, like you said at the top of the webinar, when in doubt, leave it out.
Leave it out, right?
Correct.
Okay, well, thank you, Linda, Steve, and Clayton, for taking the time and sharing with all of us today and answering our questions. For everyone who's in attendance, thank you for joining us and participating, being so engaged today. With this webinar Playback will be available on our website and YouTube channel within 48 hours. And with that, thanks for joining our final webinar of 2023. We look forward to having you come back in 2024. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you all so
Thank
much.
you.